I am Trinita Lindsay. I am one of the Pottstown Borough Council. I am over the Fourth Ward, and I got into advocacy for fair funding. It all started with my taxes. It started with taxes, and then it built up from there. And then I realized the nitty gritty of how our schools were underfunded, and I got upset. And then I'm here today.
Awesome. Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe Cerisi. I'm the state rep for the area. But I got involved with school district in Springford, where I live. In 2003, I served for 12 years on the board. So this fair funding stuff is really important. It's not stuff. This fair funding situation, I should say, is extremely important to every one of the districts I represent.
Lisa?
Hello, I'm new. I missed the meeting last week,
Welcome.
I guess it was, right? I'm from East Stroudsburg School District. I'm fifth, this is my 5th year on the board. East Stroudsburg, in case you don't know, is probably one of the least funded per student. So, we're a big district, over 7,000 students, and we get the least. We run neck and neck with Pocono Mountain for that. So
Okay.
I guess that's why I'm here. And my taxes too, like someone else mentioned earlier, right?
Yes. Well, welcome. We glad you made it.
Thank you.
And I don't want to butcher your name.
Inga?
Inga?
Inga. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
I'm new to all of this. I've just found out about the fair funding issue just a couple weeks ago when speaking with a friend of ours, Rabbi John Cutler, and in a way to try to get involved to try to make some systemic change. So I'm here with you guys just to hear what you're all about. I'm working with the Beth Israel Fair Funding Action Group, but I wanted to hear what you all are doing. I'm in Montgomery County, so I'm in a separate county from you all. So I'm just
We're Montgomery, actually.
No, we're all Montgomery County.
Well,
okay.
not East Stroudsburg.
You're not. Yeah, you're
I want to be here to hear what how I can help, what I can do, etc.
Inga, what school district are you in?
Colonial, White Marsh. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And Josie, I see you're muted. I don't know if you are able to chime in. Oh, hey.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Josie Kramer, and I am with Strasbourg School Board, and I'm here just so I can be more informed, more educated on everything.
I actually
Thank you,
moved you,
Josie.
but
We
we can't.
appreciate you coming.
I missed a lot of that.
Were you able to
From
hear
you,
me?
Trinita, too.
Oh, she said she was she said she on the school board.
Was that East Stroudsburg or Stroudsburg?
I think she said East.
Strasbourg.
Okay.
Oh, the Strasburg.
It was
Okay.
East Stroudsburg, yes.
Okay. And both are underfunded. But yeah, East is the one I am most familiar with, because I've tried to reach out to Rosemary Brown to try to get movement on the issue and have been roundly ignored so far. So
Yeah, well, Rosemary Brown, Maureen Madden, and of
Okay.
course, Senator Scavello is our area,
Okay. Rosemary Brown is on the education committee, so I think I've reached out to her because she's not a co-sponsor and she represents a very underfunded district, and she seemed like one who should be a co-sponsor as a no-brainer, but we'll talk. We're actually going to talk about that too as we go through. So
That's good. We were supposed to get together with her as a group and, give her our numbers and, kind of sit down and chat with her. We never did get to do it. I don't know. It's part because we've had an uproar on our board, but also because of the COVID thing as well. So we just never got around to that.
okay.
Well, now's a good time. It's funny. When we first started with all this, the COVID stuff, we were like, well, kind of things are crazy. We should just, take a pause. And we were like, no, wait, everybody's home. So why don't we just have a ton of meetings? And we actually began this group by just saying on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., we're going to meet and we're going to talk about fair funding. And then we're going to report back to Laura and I both serve on our community relations committee. So we report back to our community relations committee about what we're working on. So And then we decided to start holding the workshops, and we had one workshop last week, and we're going to have another workshop this Saturday. That's more of a public facing, you know, like the one last week was more school board members, and we're planning to have more of those. But then the one that's on Saturday is more public facing, like
Yeah.
the taxpayers.
Yes.
So how did,
go
just
ahead.
a question, how did you get my email? I mean, I guess, did I sign up for it? I don't know. I just
No, you didn't. You didn't.
So the way that I got your email address was I went down the list of all the education committee representatives. I then looked at their districts. I found out the school districts that were in their area. Then I went to the school district's website, found the email addresses of everybody I could find, and then put you into my list. So
And
it
I'm
was
the only one that responded from my district, apparently.
Is Merle on your board?
That's Stroudsburg.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
All right.
He's
Sorry.
with Josie.
I
Yeah.
apologize.
No.
We have a town near us called Pottsgrove, and Pottsgrove and Pottstown often get confused. So I imagine Stroudsburg and East Stroudsburg,
Yeah, yeah.
Stroudsburg, you know, to throw that into the mix.
But I actually serve with Josie and Merlin on the MCTI, our VOTEC or
Okay.
JSD. So I know
Okay.
them as well.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I did was I put together those email addresses that way, just pulling people who were already on listed, had their email address listed on the website. So
Okay, no, that's good. Okay.
it's a little in terms of marketing, it's a little kludgy. You know, you really probably shouldn't do that, but we got some response, and my thought was, I'm not spamming you. I'm a school board member. It's about school board related things, so
Yeah.
it's not spam, but it is kind of spam. You know, it's,
Right.
it's a
And
gray
it can
area.
help, right. And it can help you just as well as it can help us. So
Well, it's an important thing. We need to talk about it.
Well, yeah, we were talking to
Yeah,
SB.
yeah.
What is it again, Laura? PSBA. That's it.
PSBA, yeah.
We were talking to PSBA on Thursday at our school board meeting. They were like, "Well, you should be really talking to other school board members." And we're like, "Great. How do we get in touch with other school board members?" And they're like, "I don't know." Like,
Like we're not gonna help you do that.
so you know, yeah, they did not want to help us like be able to reach out to other school board members. So they want us school board members to talk, but they don't want to give us a way for us to be able to communicate with each other. So figure that one out.
That's interesting. And that's how I thought you got my number, because I'm also was asked to work with PSBA, like kind of as an advocate, I guess, you know, and I haven't even started that because COVID, you know, they sent me all the information, congratulated me for joining, but never, anyway. I don't want to hold you up.
No, you're fine.
We can get into it.
Yeah, I'm sure we could. So, I mean, since there's a few new people, we can review what was last week. But I also, before I got too far into it, I wanted to ask, especially Lisa and Josie, have you guys seen there's a video on YouTube that's about the racial bias in the current funding, the way it is right now. Have you guys seen that?
No, I have not.
No, I haven't seen that either.
Okay, so we can link it. It's really kind of a central thing that we end up talking about a lot. The workshop we did last week, that's kind of one of our like central features, and then we talk more about what it means. But how familiar are you guys with the issue generally? Like, do you know how underfunded your district is and about the racial bias, or because we could just watch the video in this if we wanted to, if it would help the rest of the meeting. It's about a 9-minute video. But if you're very familiar
that's up to
already,
you. I mean, I understand the fair funding, but I don't, I mean, I understand how underfunded we are, but I haven't, the racial bias thing, I know nothing about
okay.
as far as that piece.
Right, and for me, I understand the racial bias. I don't have all the information about how underfunded we are. I'm pretty new to the board, so I'm learning as I go. I have an understanding, but I'm not an expert on it. So yeah, I mean, I don't mind watching the video.
I feel like it could actually be useful to watch now if nobody strongly objects.
oh yes, I like
Because
watching.
it's 9 minutes long, and it is, from Trinita and I, we've both said multiple times, and maybe other board members too, it's kind of was a real linchpin for getting us involved and really,
Yes.
really fired up about it. So I'll go
Yeah.
ahead.
I have it
Go
already
ahead,
pulled
Ray.
up, Laura, if you want.
Oh, yeah, you do it then. Great.
Yeah, let me just share my screen.
The
And
video, oh yeah, that's great. The video is done by Power Interfaith, and it's a few years old, but the bias hasn't gotten any better. The inequities
Right.
haven't actually gotten better. So just know that ahead of time, that even though it's old, it's not really, it's definitely not obsolete.
all right,
Right.
can everybody see my screen?
I can
Yeah.
see it. Did you turn on the computer audio thing?
How do I do that again?
Go ahead and play it first to see if it plays the sound. No, it's not playing the sound. So maybe go in under view options up at the top. There's a place where you can say, it says share computer audio.
Leave computer in the sharing area.
Yeah, well, if you go up to the top right now, Ray, like there's a green bar and then a black bar.
Yes.
If you click on view options, see if it just automatically makes that one of them. Like if you go to the very top of the screen.
Share computer sounds.
Of any state.
There we go.
Funding for poor versus wealthy districts. This graph ranks the 50 states based on the ratio of per student spending in the poorest versus the wealthiest districts in the state. In Indiana, the poorest districts get 17% more funding per student than the richest districts, which helps provide the extra resources that poorer students tend to need for successful learning. Other states give smaller funding boosts to poorer districts, and in many states, richer districts actually get higher overall funding than poorer districts. But no state has worse inequity than Pennsylvania, where rich districts get 33% more funding per student than poor districts, nearly double the gap of the second worst state. In part, Pennsylvania's inequity is explained by the relatively low proportion of public school funding provided by the state as opposed to local revenue. While many states provide over half of public school funding, Pennsylvania provides only 34%, with nearly all the rest coming from local sources, primarily property tax revenues, which vary greatly based on local wealth. But that's only part of the problem. This talk will focus on the other part, how Pennsylvania distributes the state portion of funding dollars among its 500 school districts. First, the good news. In June 2016, Pennsylvania passed into law a fair funding formula that specifies an equitable way to divide up education funding dollars. It takes into account many factors about each district, including the number of students, how many of those students live in poverty, how many are English language learners, and how sparsely populated the district is, among others, to calculate the relative needs of each district. This formula was unanimously agreed to by a bipartisan legislative commission and is widely viewed as fair. Now the bad news. Only 6% of state funding this year goes through the FAIR formula. The law specifies that the first $5.4 billion of funding, which comprised 94% of this year's state allocation, must be distributed in exactly the same unfair way that it was distributed in 2014, before the formula was enacted. This graph compares each district's actual per-student funding this year on the vertical axis with its formula-based fair share of funding on the horizontal axis. Each dot represents a district, and the dashed line represents fair funding. If all the funds were distributed by the FAIR formula, every district would fall somewhere on that diagonal line. Instead, we see many dots above the line, which are districts getting more than their fair share, and many dots below the line, which are districts getting less than their fair share. You can see that most districts are quite a distance from the line, meaning they are getting substantially more or less than the formula says they deserve. This is disturbing, that some of our students get way more than their fair share of resources, while others get far less. But what's even more disturbing is the pattern of which districts tend to get more or less funding. Here is the same graph, but with the dots shaded according to the proportion of each district's students who are white. You can see the clear trend that whiter districts tend to be above the line and darker districts below. The trend is even clearer if we use just two colors, yellow for the 250 whitest districts and brown for the 250 least white districts. Most points above the line are yellow, meaning whiter districts getting more than their fair share of funding, and nearly all the points below the line are brown, representing less white districts getting less than their fair share of funding. To quantify the difference race makes in funding, we can sort the 500 districts in order from least white on the left to most white on the right. So as you move from left to right, you're moving from the least white district, Chester Upland, whose student population is just 2% white, to a bunch of districts on the far right of the graph whose student populations are 100% white. The size of each dot represents the number of students in the district. The vertical axis shows funding inequity, defined as the difference between fair funding and actual funding per student. Districts below the zero line are getting less than their fair share. Districts above the line are getting more than their fair share. You can see the clear trend that as districts get whiter, moving from left to right in the graph, they get increasingly more compared to what the formula says they deserve. To measure how much more, we divide the districts into 5 bins or quintiles by racial composition, each shown in a different color. Each bin contains the same number of students. Now we can compare the average funding inequity in each bin, and the trend is very clear. The whiter the district, the more generous funding they get compared to what they deserve from the state. Here are those 5 bins in a bar chart. The least white districts get, on average, over $1,900 less per student than their fair share, and the whitest districts get, on average, over $1,900 more than their fair share. And the trend is consistent across the whole range of racial composition. It's not just the least white districts that are affected by the pattern of racial bias. Rather, even average or majority white districts tend to get more funding the higher the percentage of white students. And this trend is uniquely correlated with race. If we look instead at poverty and examine the average inequity at different poverty levels, we find that the poorest students are getting shortchanged an average of $1,500 per student. But we don't see a clear pattern across the whole spectrum of poverty levels as we did with race. In fact, the wealthiest districts are getting about their fair share from the state. Middle-income districts are faring much better, and it's only the poorest districts, which by the way are overwhelmingly less white, that are slammed with dramatically less than their fair share of funding. So how does this funding inequity affect individual districts? Here's one example of 2 somewhat poor districts in western PA, East Allegheny and Titusville. The yellow bars show each district's actual funding this year. The purple bars show their fair share of funding according to the formula, and the green bars show the difference, or funding inequity. The formula says that based on their needs, they both deserve around $5,000 per student of this year's state funding. But East Allegheny, a racially diverse district that is 61% white, is getting just $3,600 per student. Titusville, which is 94% white, is getting $6,800 per student. These are two districts with nearly identical financial needs, yet the whiter district is receiving $3,200 more for every student than the less white district. Here's another example, this time of 2 fairly wealthy districts. The formula says their fair share of this year's state funding would be around $1,400 per student. Upper Merion is getting about $600 per student, $800 less than their fair share. But Southside District is getting a whopping $8,600 per student, a windfall of $7,200 over their fair share. And by the way, Southside is 99% white, while Upper Merion is 59% white. Here's an example of 2 districts that, despite vastly different needs, are getting the same level of funding from the state, about $3,500 per student. Penn Trafford is a wealthy district, 96% of whose students are white, with median household income over $70,000 and fewer than 10% of students living in poverty. Wilkes-Barre's average household income is about half that of Penn Trafford's, and about 41% of its mostly minority students live in poverty. Wilkes-Barre's fair share of this year's state funding would be around $7,000 per student, and Penn Trafford's $1,200. That amounts to over a $5,000 per student fairness gap between these 2 districts. We need to change the flawed narrative about education funding in Pennsylvania. We hear that Pennsylvania has implemented a fair funding formula, yet that formula currently applies to only 6% of state funding. Current law locks in the historical inequities in the rest of the money forever. We hear that putting all state funding through the formula would decimate many districts. But decimate here is a code word for eliminating the unfair windfall these districts have been getting for decades. There are common sense ways to gradually transition to fair funding so that no district suffers drastic sudden cuts. Finally, we hear we can't harm some districts to help others. This attitude is based on a flawed assumption that the status quo is the basis for measuring harm. But harm is getting less than you need, not less than last year. All students are equally deserving of adequate education, regardless of what their districts got in the past. Pennsylvania needs to distribute all, not just 6%, of its state education dollars through the fair funding formula.
Oh, sorry. Oh, how did that, wait, what did I just do? Sorry, I apologize.
I did the exact same thing last time. I couldn't get it to stop fast enough.
Because YouTube doesn't want me to stop.
No, it wants you to keep watching.
Hi, Merlin. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm pretty good.
Glad to have you here. For anybody who's seen that video for the first time, did we lose somebody? Yes, we did. No, we didn't. For anybody who's seen the video for the first time, any thoughts or observations or feelings? Nothing?
Well,
gonna say-
here's an amazing piece of information. A reporter from our local newspaper, Pocono Record, which I'm sure you all read on a regular basis,
When we can.
called me to ask about things that were going on in the district. It was a fishing trip for him. And we have a kerfluffle going on, which I think I talked about at our last meeting, because one of our students posted a racially tinged video. And what I suggested to him, that a much more important issue than throwing the book at a teenage student was to look at the big issues, which are our institutional biases that discriminate toward underprivileged students. And I started to give him some numbers, and he said, well, how do you know all this? How do you decide which districts should be getting more money? And I said, because of the fair funding formula. He said, what's that? Now, this is a newspaper reporter. So I said, and he said, I haven't seen anybody writing about this. I said, you should Google fair funding. There's a ton of writing about it. And I was walking the dog during this conversation, and when I got home, I forwarded to him this video, which we just watched.
Mm-hmm.
That should get him fired up.
Well, that's what I told him. And by the way, he is a African-American. And I said in my note that accompanied the video, I said, this should get your blood flowing. I haven't heard back from him. But the point of this is that there are just so many people, including people in the media, who are unaware of the funding inequities in this state.
Merlin, I would guess that there are probably school board members who are unfamiliar with the funding inequities in the state. So
Some of them willfully if they're in an overfunded district.
yes, that too. So
Did he,
Lisa,
did he,
I'm sorry, Josie, go ahead.
did he offer to do any research if you send him the links?
Well, I think he will. You probably know him, Josie, Joe McDonald.
I'm not sure that I know him. No, I'm not familiar with the local reporters, but it would be great if he can do some research on it and put it all over the newspaper so that parents and more people are educated on it and get involved.
Well, as I said last time, our legislators, they get sick of hearing from us, and the only thing that will move them is if the public gets involved.
Right. And I think that's part of what we want to do moving on from here is we want to start figuring out how we need to expand, because school board members, just us reaching out, yeah, they're not necessarily going to listen. But if we start passing it along to other school board members who in turn are talking about it during meetings or bringing it up in places that reporters are likely to start digging into it more, I think it can grow. So one of the things coming off, oh, you know what, I wanted to ask, and did anybody else who hadn't seen the video have any instant feedback? Lisa, I thought you were trying to say something, but you're muted.
Right. I didn't realize I was muted, but I don't know that I said anything.
Oh, okay.
I actually think I did see this video before because, Marlon talks about it all the time, and we also talk about it at usually around budget time when we're, why is most of our tax base from, most of our funding for the school district from our tax base, which, and
Right.
Yeah, getting the word out is tough, and people don't understand it. It's a little confusing because they don't understand, and they can't understand the magnitude of or the impact of that.
Well, there are two angles. I mean, the angle that I've talked about up until now is that we have in our county some of the highest taxes in the state.
Yes.
And that's something that resonates with a lot of people, or at least you would think it would.
When we talk about it with our tax base, that's language we use pretty clearly. Like, do you want lower taxes? Then you want fair funding, because somebody doesn't necessarily need to understand the math or where the sources are. But if one of the things we have a plan already put in place. Let's say magically tomorrow we get the $13 million that we're owed every year. We already have a plan of what we're going to do with that money. And one of the things that we're going to do with the money is we're going to lower our taxes that we're already taking from people. So we can clearly say to people, like, if you want lower taxes, then you want fair funding. It's as simple as that,
Right. So I think what we came away from last week's workshop with was kind of who do we start putting pressure on? And so there were a few of us that kind of left the meeting with some homework to do to figure out who needs the pressure. And one of the next decision makers, or the main decision maker that we would be looking to change their mind or behavior at this point, would be the Education Committee in the House. The Education Committee in the House has the power to take the fair funding bills, and there's a few, but one of them would be like 100% equity right away. They have the ability to hold a hearing on it. They have the ability to send it to the legislature. But there's been a real problem getting movement there, partly because the chair of the Education Committee represents a host of very overfunded school districts. Like, make you sick when you look it up. It just made me sick. So, but there are people in that committee who we feel might be able to be persuaded, all the more right now because of the moment we're at in terms of racial justice. If this is put in front of them, like, this isn't just an education funding issue. This is a racial discrimination issue. And do you want to be on the wrong side of that? And so went through the list of House Education Committee members and came up with 6 different representatives that we wanted to start putting pressure on. And part of the way we're putting pressure is having these meetings. And we got real lucky tonight with several of you from Stroudsburg and East Stroudsburg, because that's the general vicinity that Rosemary Brown is in. And that's why I was saying I was going to bring that up. She's underfunded. Actually, this would be a great time for me to show this chart. Let me go find it. Let me find it before I start screen sharing here. We have charts for every legislator in the state, every state legislator, and it shows how underfunded or overfunded they are. Rosemary Brown is, oh, no, maybe I'm wrong. Hold on. Okay, here, I'm going to the wrong page. I'm going to pull up the page and then I'll share it with you guys. Rosemary Brown is underfunded by, I believe, 13 million every year.
That's East Stroudsburg.
Well, no, I'm not saying East Stroudsburg's 13. We have it divided by, and I totally goofed on this. I know I have her thing. Just give me a moment. We have this divided up, not by district, not just by district, but by legislative district, which allows us to specifically know when we're talking to a legislator how much of each school district is in their district and how underfunded they are net, not just a given school district that they represent, but how much they're underfunded altogether, which we think we've found to be useful very objectively in cases where we were able to demonstrate to legislators, hey, look, we know you're worried about offending the school district over there, but look at the sum total of what you've got going on. You are underfunded overall. So hold on, I got it. I found what I was looking for.
Rosemary has part of Pocono Mountain as well, I
right.
believe. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so here's Rosemary Brown. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a busy chart, but it's very useful. Right here, you have her kind of net underfund, overfund. So she's got 2 school districts, which are Delaware Valley and Pleasant Valley, who are both overfunded a bit. And actually, it might be more than a bit, but she represents only parts of those districts. So this has, down here, you can see the fraction of the school district in the legislative district. So this breaks it down and prorates each district to give an idea of her overall over or underfunded. And you can see East Stroudsburg there is the one that is just like in your face, underfunded by over $2,100 per student every year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give everybody a moment just to kind of look at that before I keep talking, actually, because it is busy, I realize.
And we will, we're going to make screenshots of these individual slides for the representatives, and we can share that with everybody so that when you're reaching out, to Rosemary, for example, you could have this slide to be able to refer to.
Yes, and this shouldn't be the first time that she has seen this, actually. We've taken these with us. When we went last year, Trinita and Marlene and I actually went and delivered a bunch of letters from clergy in our town about the issue of us being underfunded, and we took these sheets to the legislators who are net underfunded. So this shouldn't be news, but it might strike them differently coming from somebody in their district. And if hearing things repeatedly sometimes is exactly what's needed.
Yes.
So for the white here, can I ask a question about that?
Yep.
So East Stroudsburg's 44%. Does that mean 44% white?
Yes. Meaning
Okay.
you are a majority minority. And
Right.
that just helps to demonstrate to her and anybody else who will listen, hey, look at the schools that are underfunded here. And it is consistent. I mean, I looked at multiples of these yesterday because I have the whole list of them. And every time I'm just like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
This
so
is
Pleasant
crazy.
Valley is 75%. And of course, they're slightly overfunded.
Right,
A little bit more.
right. And there are aspects of this that are regional. Nobody is arguing that the legislators sat down in a room and said, you know, how can we disadvantage kids of color? Well, particularly these legislators. I mean, there have been things done in the past that were very intentional, but this is largely about people holding on to the power that they've been given from the racist decisions that were made in the past and a whole bunch of other decisions.
The only thing I'd have to say is, like, in the old funding piece of it, it would probably have been flipped before. I think our percentage has definitely, you know, went down, you know, if different from what it is today.
Meaning your racial
influx.
demographics?
Huh?
Meaning the racial demographics?
Yes.
Or, okay. Yeah, no, and that's shifted. And it tends to be that the areas that have had more growth are more underfunded because the funding never kept up with the growth.
Right.
But what happened with Hold Harmless was that districts, you know, you got rural PA, which is largely white. They've seen a decrease in people there at all, but because of Hold Harmless saying, we will never give you less than before, that's part of how this happened.
Yeah, right.
So we have these sheets for each of the 6 legislators we want to target, but looking at the group we have here and my list, certainly Representative Brown is one that I would think would be smart for us to go after as a group, reaching out to other school board members from these school boards, reaching out to, you know, community, whoever would be interested to bring this issue up and say, hey, like, why would you not co-sponsor this bill and push for it to get a hearing? And that's what we want to do with each of the 6 is
we want to make it as public as possible. So, you know, what we talked about in the workshop last week was we should be doing this as publicly as possible, because what's going to make a legislator act is when their constituents are talking about it, when their constituents are talking about it publicly, it makes it even more, you know, for them to want to act. So,
yes. And probably their constituents don't even know.
Right.
Oh, right.
A lot of people don't even know, like people who don't have kids, you know, in the school district, and, you know, just not even, you know, paying attention to this. So it's important that we just put it in their face.
Is there a new, I'm sorry, is there a new bill being proposed, or is this just the, you know, same fair funding?
There's 2. There's one, the one we tend to talk about the most is HB 961, which is like 100. So House Bill 961. What it would do would be to make 100% fair funding. All the basic education funds go through the formula right now. There is also a bill.
The new formula, right?
The fair funding formula, yeah, the good one, the one we want, like the one that's totally based on need. And there's another one, our 1313, which, I mean, you don't have to remember all the numbers, but there's another bill in both the House and the Senate that are gradual. It would be over the course of 4 years, we will phase in fair funding. Realistically, that's the kind of bill that's going to end up happening just because it's a little bit more palatable. But we tend to push for HB 961 because it gives us more space to negotiate then. It says, here's what's fair right now, kind of knowing that compromises will end up getting made. But so that's why we talk about the 100% right now bill. And that's what we're pushing for people to co-sponsor. From what I saw though, all the people on this list, which I will put into a document to be shared, or maybe me and Ray will put into a document to be shared along with these sheets that give each legislator maybe contact information, or I don't know, that's pretty easy to find anyway, but they are not co-sponsors. They're not co-sponsors of the other bill. There is one rep who is actually from not too far from here, who is a co-sponsor on the more gradual bill, but he's not a co-sponsor on this one. And I've met with him, and that's, you know, we've had conversations, but these other people, they're not even co-sponsors on the gradual bill. They just haven't done anything. So we want to pressure them to be like, why would you not? Like, how can you ignore this? I mean, and she's the worst because she represents such underfunded districts that it's hard. I struggle to understand why she hasn't acted on it on some level.
I'm surprised to hear that, to be honest, but she's,
You're surprised to hear that she hasn't?
yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I keep thinking, like, what's the deal? And I tried to, like I said, I tried to schedule meetings.
Yeah.
There might be reasons. I don't know enough about her to get a better picture of her, but she's one who, it seems like, man, like, look at this. This is crazy. I mean, she represents 3/4 of the East Stroudsburg area school district, and it just, yeah. So,
Lisa, I think you guys need to invite her to a school board meeting and ask her why.
Oh boy, yes, okay. Well, I was sitting in her office this is probably 6 months ago now, and we were discussing this, but I really didn't even know this piece of it that we're discussing now. So that's an important.
Well, you could have a conversation at a school board meeting about fair funding. You could watch the video and then invite her to talk about it. You know, I mean, to be honest, the way I sort of see it is, and everybody here can sort of add to, you know, can agree to it. We all get called out for stuff that we do at a school board meeting, right? We make decisions on behalf of our school district all the time. And we get people who are parents and all kinds of things, and they call us out for stuff that they want to know why it's going on in the school. Mm-hmm. So why would we not turn around and call out our legislators for things that we think that they should be supporting?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So when are the bills going up for like, are you going to send information like when the bills will go up for a vote? And
well, they won't go up for a vote until they get out of committee. And so far they can't get out of committee because the committee chair, who's the one who, his name's Kurt Sonny, he won't even bring them up for a hearing. And he told us he would actually this time last year, like almost to the day, actually. He told us, 14th, I'll have a hearing. I will, what, Trinita?
June 14th it was.
June 12th.
12th, I'm sorry, 12th.
But still, yeah, he told us he would hold a hearing. Then we pressured him for a hearing, and he ended up saying he only said he'd do it because he felt intimidated by us, and he wasn't really gonna do it.
And then the us was pastors from churches.
No. The us was black pastors, right?
Black pastors. Right.
And it was the man. Yeah, the man is not our favorite. He is not our favorite. But we need people who are in the education committee, because we already got 8. I think it's 8. There's 8 co-sponsors in the education committee now for the 100% fair funding bill. We need more to push him to say, man, like, for one thing, you said you'd have it. For another thing, my districts are underfunded. Why don't you care? You know, he needs pressure from within. And that's why we want to pressure these people, is because that's how the best way we think we can get to him.
So Rosemary Brown's like a big one, but is there others that you have like on your radar that are also equally as?
Yeah, well, maybe not equally. Okay, let me pull up a list here. Let me do another screen share. And excuse me, I'm learning Google everything right now.
Yeah,
and
I have no idea what you're doing.
So disorganized.
One of our other ideas too, and we're talking about people to target. One of our other goals is to target to leverage if people are up for, and all the representatives are up for election this year. So if they're running opposed to someone and we want to get, we want to sway a vote, then we start talking to, if they're not going to sign, we start talking to the person they're running against,
Right.
So that's one thing. The other thing is there's a bunch of school districts, there's a handful of school districts that are actually right along the line, right? So there may be a little bit to the positive or a little bit to the negative. And they're the people that if they agreed to this, it wouldn't really impact their budget. So they're not a bad group of people for us to go after also, because it would add more leverage to the vote, but it would also, it's not really going to impact them. They don't really have, their skin in the game is very small, I think that those would be people that we would need to come up with something that we could offer them which I think is really, honestly, it's cyber charter reform, right? I think that's the other part of this puzzle is there's a lot of support from legislators for cyber charter reform, but for some odd reason, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Everyone says, oh, we support this, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere.
Yeah. So here's the list. I have this this is from an old list, but it's the right people. It's updated. It's a master list for the House Education Committee. So what I did last week after our workshop was I went through and did a little research on who it made sense to target, who wasn't super overfunded or was underfunded, like, or who wasn't super overfunded and who was kind of in the middle, like who might be a soft target there. And I came up with a total of, I think it's going to show 6 on here, but we'll see. So Barbara Gleam, who is, it says, so she's from out in the Carlisle area. She's got a school district that's underfunded by 2.6 million, but that's it. She's just a little overfunded overall, and she's got this school district, Cumberland Valley, that is underfunded. So we thought, hey, we could reach out to Cumberland Valley school board members for them to put pressure on her. And she does have a race coming up, and I'll share all this with everybody afterwards.
Barb is a former school board member.
Say that again?
She's a former school board member.
She is? Oh, good to know. I like it.
Yeah.
Of course, Rosemary Brown, 13 million.
Right. Well, and most of them are a lot less. Yeah, so you got, that one's the most extreme, I think, which is why I said what I said. She's the most extreme. So you got her, which it sounds like you guys already have a little bit of relationship with her that you can put some pressure there.
And she's got a running mate too, so this might be a good.
Meaning she's got somebody challenging her?
Yeah, for the fall election, yeah.
Rodriguez, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. And I thought too that would be a good opportunity to, again, in this one especially, and at this time especially, really just highlighting the racial bias. And I think to be able to demonstrate that, it's not just a matter of we're just throwing that out there. I mean, that's data backed. Like it's there. James Orate, who, if I recall, I have other sheets, but I'll get lost if I go looking for all of them. He's overfunded a little bit, but he's got a couple school districts, including Hazleton, that are pretty overfunded, underfunded. Hazleton is underfunded by 13.5 million every year.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm mixing that up. Orate is South Fayette, and that's 3.4 underfunded. My list here doesn't match that, or doesn't, it's in a different order. But he's underfunded a little, and he does also have a race.
Let me tell you something. Courtney told me to tell you hi, and she misses you.
Okay, David Hickernow.
Hey, you will be.
He's got a district that's underfunded by 2.7 million, which isn't anything, crazy. At least it doesn't sound crazy to me when we're underfunded by 13.5 million. But if you're a school district that's hurting right now, that matters. I mean, 2.7 million matters. And he's also got a race, somebody challenging him. Jerry Knowles, he's got someone challenging him, and he's one of the ones who represents Hazleton, which is the one that's underfunded by 11.5 million, but there's also a few others in his district. And did I miss somebody else? Oh, Gerald Mullery. He also represents Hazleton, and a few others, and also has a race. I don't know who I must have taken off the people. I took people off my list who had no race whatsoever, especially if they didn't have any school districts that were underfunded by a lot. Like there were a few that were underfunded by like $63 per student, and I just kind of figured we could focus on something.
Wow. $53. Wow.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's still something, but I just don't feel like we have limited time, limited people, and so these were the 6 that I picked out.
So I'll work on Mullery.
Okay.
his district has had a lot of problems this year. He has a district that has Whitehaven that they wanted to close, and I stood with him and voted with him on that because I felt we need to give him support. That's the state institution. And he also has a prison that they're looking to close. So there's a lot of loss happening in his district right now.
Okay.
So I'll try and reach out to him tomorrow if I can.
Okay, and just so you know, I mean, and we can send you that data sheet too. He definitely is one who is a net overfund. So even though he's representing some districts that are really underfunded, he's also representing some that are overfunded. And so just be aware of that, and I'll send you that.
That may be
sheet.
his problem, right, that he
Right.
can't support this because of how much loss he's had in his district.
Right. So just, I mean, I don't know what's feasible at this point, but I just, that awareness, it can be helpful. And again, we know we're going to be pushing for something that's more nuanced than just, hey, let's run everything through the formula. And so why don't I pull up his thing? Because you can see how underfunded how over some of his districts are.
So I'd like that document. So you're sharing that with us somehow, right?
The one with all of the little graphs, which is now kind of being weird for me. I don't know what's wrong. We will share the select ones for the ones we're working on. I don't have permission to share like everything.
Okay.
It's Gerald, right? But
we did get this legally. Let's put it that way.
We got it. I was gonna say we are allowed to have it and show it, and we're allowed to show it. You know, it was kind of a, hey, treat this with care. We don't want the whole thing exposed to everyone.
Who is we?
Power. This information is from Power Interfaith. And I am taking forever to find this guy because this is a really big document. There we go. Okay. So he represents Hanover and Hazleton that are underfunded, but he also represents these 3 other districts that, hey, look at that, are a lot whiter, and they're overfunded. So I don't know how tight of a race he's in, like if he needs to.
He's not going to have.
Say that again?
His race won't be easy, and because he's lost such issues and he's gone against the governor on the whole closing of the institution there, it's going to be a problem for him. So he's really been trying to hold the line.
Okay. So yeah, I think whatever pressure you end up putting on him is probably going to look or feel a little different from if we get some board members in Hanover and Hazleton,
Right.
which is fine. That's just how this works, right? So whatever. But I'll share this sheet.
Okay.
To the degree
Laura, as we were going through the list of people who we want to target, I was looking in the data in the mail program that I use to email everybody, and saw that we got some people who had opened the emails a couple times from those school districts. So I think what I would want to do is one of our things, do some targeted emails to those people so that we can maybe set up conversations just to talk with them, whether it's on the phone or on Zoom or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to if their phone numbers are posted on the site, I'm happy to initiate person-to-person texts or calls, or whatever we think is good.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this information can be shared with school board members, but not with parents?
Oh, what we're showing you right now, it can be, the ones that we will make available can be shared in your district as much as you want. What I'm not going to do is make the entire 20 or 253 pages instantly accessible to everyone, because we want to guard some of the, it's all this kind of information, but we don't want the whole thing just getting dumped online somewhere. So we kind of share them on a per legislator thing. So if you want any particular one, you just let me know. And we'll make it available, but we are definitely going to make available all of the ones here that we're going to target, and you can share it with whoever you want.
I think we got a fairly new board, so I think it would be good to educate them as well. And some of them are very active with Rosemary Brown as well. So if they understand that, what's going on here with the funding, and they already have a rapport with her, they can, others can start putting pressure on her
Right.
too as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. I agree with that. I also think that with all the racial inequality that's going on right now, it is important for parents to understand why things are happening and where the root cause is, where everything's happening, and try to make a change, because we're not the only ones. The boards are not the only ones that vote. Parents vote.
And
I would hope, in Rosemary Brown's case, I would hope that she would jump on it to say, hey, this is, she's in a race right now against somebody else, and say, here's something I'm looking at and something we need to do to fund this to fund these school districts for the taxes. And I realize the inequality, blah, 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 that kind of thing.
And if you want, Lisa and Josie, we would be more than happy to do where maybe even our board, our committee comes on your committee or something to that effect and presents. It could be something as simple as, we attended a meeting and we would like to invite these people to come and present, and we'd be more than happy to come and present to your committee or the board, or however you want to do it. We're board members just like you guys are, and we know that sometimes when a board comes back and says, oh, hey, we just found this thing out, that's one thing, but when somebody else presents, it's like, hey, wait, what is this? So
it's a little bigger than just one person.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Do you have pages like this for members of the Senate?
Yep. So you just let me know if there's someone you have in mind.
Mario Scavello.
There you go.
Okay. I'll write it down. And Mario.
Yeah.
Mario is most of the districts you just named, but Rosemary Brown and then beyond.
That's right.
So he represents the same basic area.
Maureen Madden's on there too, and she's going to have an opponent in the fall too, but I didn't see her on that list, so I don't know.
Does she may already be a co-sponsor if she's in the House.
Yeah,
Ed committee.
She doesn't stand for this. Now, there is a factor that you're not putting into this, because I don't think you have the numbers. It's if we not only fund the basic education the right way, but special ed.
Yes.
And a lot of those districts that are overfunded, that would come down in, if you go through the fair funding formula, when you add special ed back, that money comes back into play. So they really aren't losing much.
Right. Right. I know that's true for Pottsgrove. Yes.
Pottsgrove, exactly. Pottsgrove will stay at the level that they're at when you fund special education properly. So some of these districts may stay at the level they're at, and there may be a net no loss to any of them.
So
and
should we go?
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, should we be looking at their budgets, at the budgets of the school districts?
You have to look at the budget of funding special education the right way. I know Mike Sturla has all that information, so if you want to reach out to him, he probably would give it to you.
Okay.
That'd be good. I think too, that's part of how it gets talked about then by legislators is, hey, look, we're going to fix this and we're going to do these couple things at once because it's really going to help equalize. I mean, and honestly, because I realize this is such a long shot still at this point, at least until after November, but the work now definitely still matters. If it gets paired with other reforms like charter reform, it will help some of the districts that could stand to lose a little if some of these other things were dealt with. I realize that becomes harder and harder to do on another level though.
Yeah.
But there's Mario Scavello. He is net underfunded by about 8 million. So, but we can put this in the same folder we'll share with you guys then. The only other thing I wanted to make sure we mentioned tonight In Pottstown, we're working on, and this is really late, so I realize this might not be an option for other school boards at this point. We are probably going to be submitting a change to the PSBA platform that directly addresses the funding inequities, that calls out the racism in the way the funding is right now, and calls for it to be fixed fully and completely and immediately. So we are going to be, we got to vote on it, which hasn't happened yet, but we're going to end up submitting that then to PSBA, because we're trying to nudge them to care more about this, because they haven't done a lot to really push for full equity. Ray's laughing.
If you want to have yourself a good, well, laugh, cry, however you want to, go to our Facebook page and look up the our last Thursday's committee meeting, in which PSBA presented to our board, and then our board turned around and asked them about fair funding. And it was like very evasive, to say the least.
And we kept asking them. It was delightful.
Hey,
right, but at the end of the day, that's something that has to be done. We have to attack on every front. So as much as the legislature needs to hear our message, so does PSBA, because PSBA carries a lot of weight. And until they respect the issue, and until they respond to it, we lose a valuable partner. And they did try to skip around, because they tried to do I don't want to get anybody mad at me. When you try not to get anybody mad at you, what you wind up doing is getting everybody mad at you.
Yeah. Well, and if anybody wants another little bit of fun to look at, our superintendent, Mr. Rodriguez, just posted at PSBA, wonderful thing about the inequity, and really called them out there too. So
yeah, imagine that. I wonder
that's gonna get some retweets.
You said you wanted a campaign.
That's right. So, and there's so many different things that can be worked on, but I think that, does everybody kind of feel like they've got something to take away from this to work on?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Glad I tuned in.
Yeah, well, and so we try to have these meetings every Tuesday night. So next Tuesday we'll come back and we'll talk about what's happened since then, and with the goal is to keep nudging it forward,
it's
getting movement in the right direction. Yeah.
The idea is to, we started out with just a core group of us, and then we did where we reached out to other people, and we'd ask you guys if you can think of any other school board members that you might know in other districts that are underfunded, how we can, how you can reach out to them, invite them to this. The link is always the same. So there's that, and any, material that you can do that can be, shared social media wise. And like I said, if you want to have us, if you want us to present to your board, your committee, we'd be more than happy to do that. We want this to be a push out, So we start out with a group of people, and then they reach out to the people, and this is like, how many people can we spread this out? And the way I think about it is, school board members know what school board members are doing. They know what they're going through. They know how to get things done. I mean, we get together. We're actually a pretty functional board. We have our problems every once in a while, but we always put aside, our personalities to try to make sure what we're doing is on behalf of the kids. We know you guys are doing the same thing. So the great thing is that we're reaching out to our peers, and our peers are facing the fight that they're fighting. So we can, they know that we're not coming to them with something trivial. We're coming with something to them that's important. So.
And can I just say that there are 2 people on this meeting who are graduates of Stroudsburg High School?
Go ahead.
For Stroudsburg people who are on here? Yeah. So I have read the Pocono Record many times.
Good.
However, known by its true name, Stroud Union High School.
Stroud Union High School, yes.
Awesome. Cool. Any last thoughts before we end the meeting?
Just how do I find it? How do I find this
How
information?
many here,
It's
how
not a
many
thing.
here have been to PSBA's delegate assembly?
No, but I am one of the people going this year.
I was with you, Merlin, remember?
Yeah, well,
We are planning on having 2 people from our school board attend, and we're planning on making as many connections as we possibly can while we're there. So we are definitely planning on going to the meeting and going definitely with an agenda. So that's they were like at the meeting that we just had with them, presentation, they're like, you gotta go. We're like, we're gonna go, don't worry, and you may regret inviting us. So we're definitely going with an agenda to meet as many people as possible and really make a lot of connections. So
I just want to, I looked at your proposal for the platform.
Right.
And I love what you're calling for, but my hunch is that when it goes to the delegate assembly, which is dominated by overfunded districts,
We're going to get turned down. No,
Yep.
and we expect that. Part of what we were wanting to do with this was to make, draw a clear line in the sand for what we think is right, knowing that we very likely will get shot down, but that it gives us an opportunity both during the platform committee when there's public comment, and then at the delegate assembly to speak on behalf of it, which I don't care if it doesn't make it into their I care. I'd love for it to get into their platform, but I'm more interested in getting the issue noticed and making connections with other school board members like this who also know that they're underfunded. Because in the end, I think that action and behavior that we're doing has the potential to move the issue forward as much or more than PSBA putting it in their platform and ignoring it because it doesn't even make their priorities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
it makes a certain kind of sense. The other thing you can do, and I'm waiting with bated breath for your speech, is to shame PSBA for waddling on a discriminatory issue.
That's exactly what I'm already speech writing in my head. I confess.
Good.
I started a week ago or last Thursday night on that because they need to be shamed. Like, it's ridiculous that they have been so anemic on this issue and continue to be. I mean, they put out their anti-racist action plan today, and I'm reading it thinking, how can you not address the funding inequity? How can you tell us we're going to help you with equity? We want you to work on your equity in your schools and not actually be a champion for this. It's just ridiculous. So they heard it from me a little bit earlier in the meeting I was in too. And
Look, PSBA has been this forever. We almost left when I was on the school board because we felt it was a waste of $15,000 a year. And the first time I spoke on the steps of Harris at the Capitol with Governor Rendell, we were talking about fair funding of our district, and it was a budget impasse, and they gave me a script, and I said, to hell with you with a script, I'm saying what I want to say. I'm vocal on this, and I have PSBA in my office, and I told them, I can't believe that you have pulled away and you're supporting the charter schools on one of the issues that came up. They said, well, we're staying neutral. I said, that's bullshit. Neutral is support.
Right.
You are either for or you're against. It's not neutral. And these are not issues you could be neutral for. Now, one thing I think that you should do is I'm sitting here listening to this. The 4 districts I represent, I mean, my former board, Springford, is considered a wealthier district, but they're still $1 million underfunded.
right.
So don't concentrate just on those districts that are like Pottstown, of course, which you hear me, of course, I'm screaming about constantly. But get those other boards on, because $1 million in Springford is a whole % tax increase.
Right.
So if you're able to get Springford, Upper Marion, Lower Marion is not overfunded. They would make some money from this.
But their legislators generally already support us, don't they?
They do. But look at some of those districts that are wealthier. It's your Republicans who don't support you,
Right.
for the most part.
For the
And now
most
that
part.
Turzide is gone, because Turzide is all for vouchers,
Mhm.
and Cutler's going to become our next speaker. Ugh. You know, maybe we'll have a little movement because Turzide has held this. 1800 was going to run again from what we just saw.
Yeah.
Well, you sent me. I don't think it's going to. You said it was off the table. I think he just put it on the table before he left, and then it was taken off.
Okay.
But
That's the vibe I got today too from a conversation I was in. They said it was just kind of a procedural move, but I was nervous
Yeah.
when somebody reached
it was
out
a
to me about
bullshit move
that.
for his one more, dig at
Yeah.
public education. And in his speech, his resignation speech last week as he left, he talked about how we overfund all of our districts across the state.
Yeah.
So I would look at some of those wealthier districts too that may not have reps on that list, who you can get to pressure them and say, look, you can bring in $2 million to your district.
Right.
This $2 million is a 2% tax increase. So you'd be a hero this year.
Yeah, and you know what, Joe? Maybe I'll work on that a little more in the Montgomery County Legislative Committee I'm in, and in the PSBA Buzz meet. Like, I may work on that in those meetings because they're local.
Tina Valletto will give you all the help you need on that. I don't know where.
Yeah, no, she's great.
Stevens and Mert, I don't know if they're on the bill. It's a good time to get to Mert because he's leaving. Marcy Topol's leaving, so I don't know where Boyertown falls on that issue. I'm trying to think of the Republicans. You had stats on that list.
Do you mean how overfunded Boyertown is?
No, to see if they're funded. Are they overfunded, Boyertown?
They are. About 600, I think.
All right, then forget about them.
Yeah.
But to Joe's point, and I agree 100%. Any district that is underfunded is a potential partner of ours, and we need to reach out to
And
them.
I agree. I just know we have limited time.
Right.
I have limited time. So, which is why I've been focusing on the things I have been, because
This bill will never run in this legislative session.
and I do understand that. I just figure as much as we can make progress with various legislators now,
right,
get more co-sponsors, potentially, I don't know, create some ruckus in the ed committee. I think it's all a win.
Right. And at the end of the day, the two things, whether we're talking about legislators, which are moved by the potential vote, votes move legislators. PSBA, membership moves them. So if they got the message that a number of underfunded schools, take a number, I don't care, we got 100 and whatever it is, 50
150, yeah.
Right, to pick from, that even 20% of them say, we're pulling out of PSBA because you're not supporting us. I think there might be a little bit of a difference, because they're going to start to multiply 20 times 15,000 and say, I don't know if we can lose this.
Yep.
Is what moves them.
Good stuff, frustrating stuff, but.
Okay.
Cool. So here's what we'll be doing.
Okay, I'm sorry, Laura.
I was just going to say, as far as getting the information out to you, Ray and I will put together a folder in Google Drive, which we will share with everybody who's been in these meetings. Does that sound good, Ray?
Yeah, and we'll put screenshots of each of the 6 people that we were talking about,
and a few others that have been asked for, and a few other documents too, just to show it, because some of them have contact information that makes it useful, and anything else we think would be helpful to you guys, we'll put in there and send it. That way you can just have whatever you need from there.
Add Maureen Madden.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. I know the name. I just feel like.
She's a Democrat and she would be supportive, but she needs to be reminded that this is an important issue.
Okay. Are we sure she's not already a co-sponsor?
Maureen?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think she is.
I feel like she is, but.
Yeah, she is.
Can you also share the link for the video?
Yes.
I actually put it in the chat if you want it. It's already in the chat.
I have a link to it.
Yeah,
Joe.
but we'll put it in there too, just for ease. And then what was this that you put up here, Ray? Oh, it's the link to
I put
the
the
bill.
link to the bill, and I also put the link to the video in the chat.
Okay, awesome. And this is the same link we'll use for future meetings too. So
Yeah.
just so everybody knows that.
This is a continuing Zoom meeting, so it's always the same URL.
Cool. Okay, so as long as everybody feels good that they know what they're doing, we are done.
Message for Mrs. Armato.
Yes, Mr. Armato?
I'll be a couple minutes late yet. I still have a project to finish.
Look at these two. They got to speak over Zoom.
Luke and I
night.
sometimes text in the same, we're in the same house.
Hey, John, my wife apologized for almost hitting you with a car earlier this morning, so.
No,
Oh,
she's
nice.
doing me a favor.
That's all we need is to lose Mr. Pottstown.
No.
I'm in trouble now. She's yelling at me in the background.
Yeah.
All right, bye, guys.
Okay, have a good night, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.